Earlier last January 2023, the Philippine Coast Guard expressed its desire to gain an additional 5 more 97-meter Multirole response vessels, Teresa Magbanua-class MRRVs, from Japan, as this intention has discussed by the PCG Commandant before his audience of the delegates representing JICA or Japan International Cooperation Agency, led by its president Dr. Tanaka Akihiko. This is the latest in the series of modernization efforts surrounding the Philippine Coast Guard's fleet composition since the addition of the newly gained vessels like the said 97-meter Multirole vessels that currently came with two units, 10-1044-meter Magbanua-class vessels that also came from Japan as the Teresa Magbanua-class and the BRP Gabriela Salang, OPV 8301, from France's OCEA. The PCG Commandant continued his explanation that by having additional Teresa Magbanua-class Multirole response vessels in the Philippine Coast Guard, the Maritime Law Enforcement Agency may now have more vessels at its disposal that can conduct maritime domain awareness operations through constant patrol of the country's territorial and EEZ waters, rescue operations, and other functions that promotes the country's economic growth and development through maritime security. Having additional Teresa Magbanua-class MRRVs in the Philippine Coast Guard, to take notes, may increase not only the presence of these ships in contested waters like the West Philippine Sea as it augments the smaller Provocations-class MRRVs, but also has the capability of long endurance and loitering time in offshore waters, which is ideal in countering ongoing Chinese Coast Guard aggression in the area. In this topic, we will discuss the current incident that involves both the Chinese and Philippine Coast Guard vessels, the latter's desire to up-arming its existing white-hulled vessels, and pointing out further the capabilities of the Teresa Magbanua-class MRRVs, given with its design originating from Japan Coast Guard's Kunigami-class offshore patrol vessels. Currently, primary Philippine Coast Guard vessels such as the Provocations-class Multirole response vessel and the larger Teresa Magbanua-class vessels came with a water cannon on board. In the same manner, China Coast Guard vessels in the West Philippine Sea comes with such tool on board that they used against Philippine vessels that conducts their resupply missions to the Philippine outpost in Ayungin Shoal. It is not until recently that a recent incident involving a Chinese Coast Guard vessel aiming lasers and uncovering main gun turrets that the Philippine Coast Guard considered an idea of up-arming their vessels with guns, in a tit-for-tat attempt that may increase the chance of further provocation, as the former gets their gesture as an intimidation tactic, hoping they may scare other vessels in the area. Let us take note that a nation's Coast Guard vessels with guns is not a new concept, as the United States Coast Guard cutters usually came with gun emplacements on board. Even at one point, they even have a Harpoon anti-ship missile installed on one of their Hamilton-class cutters, whereby these ships has long since been out of service and now is in the hands of the navies of Bangladesh, Nigeria, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines, in which the Philippine ones being known as the Del Pilar-class offshore patrol vessels. In the Philippine Coast Guard's context, its primary mandate is clearly point out that the agency is primarily functioning as a maritime law enforcement agency in the pursuance of peace and order within the country's territorial and EEZ waters, as it is lining out from its mandate as an agency within the Department of Transportation, as opposed to the United States Coast Guard, which, at the time this article has published, is a military branch under the Department of Defense. That being said, it is just appropriate for the Philippine Coast Guard to keep their water cannons and have the option of adding lethal weapons like main cannons and machine guns opt out, as it is clear from its mandate that it is a civilian law enforcement agency, and that the option of getting military weaponry will be the job of the Philippine Navy since they are getting a bunch of offshore patrol vessels for this type of operation.